My name's Larry. I started flying remote control helicopters. This is my third summer. And as I have gotten older, I've entertained several hobbies, golf, gardening. None of those have really interested me. I started doing this, and this is what I want to do. This is what I do in my spare time. This particular copter is made by Align. They're a Taiwan company. I bought it from a company out of Montana. And they're very helpful in as far as assembly techniques and flying and things like that. If you're seriously considering doing this as a hobby, don't do it the way I did it. Get with somebody that knows that knows how to fly. You'll save yourself a lot of money and time. Before you get started, one of the things you need to do, and I brought this along, is you need to get a flight simulator. And this is something I got off of eBay. It's about $40. It's got a USB port on it, and you really have to be spot on the flight simulator. Your mistakes, your crashes, they don't cost you anything. When you start doing it for real, it gets a little expensive. From a maintenance standpoint, a crash on this size helicopter, you're going to be lucky if you get away with less than $150. A set of rotors, a set of blades is probably $50, and the rest of the stuff is relatively inexpensive until you start having to replace the electronics. That gets a little expensive. This is a 600. That is the diameter of the blades. The motor is what they call a 50 motor, which is basically a half a cubic inch in the combustion chamber. This is a gas copter. They also make electric copters. Using the electric copters just doesn't seem to me to be a financial viable option. The batteries are kind of expensive, and if you crash, you got to replace the batteries. Those are $100 or close to it. Plus the motors consume a lot of current, and I've seen a lot of problems with connections, and your battery dies while you're in midair. It can be a little tenuous. So basically you put gas in, you start it up, and away you go. What I'll do here, this is the real transmitter. You notice the short antenna. One of the questions I get asked a lot is how far does it go? This operates on the same frequency as your cell phones. It's up around 2.7 gigahertz. So the range on it is actually line of sight. If you can see what you're trying to transmit to, it'll transmit to it. If you let the copter get too far away from you, you lose your orientation. You can't tell if it's coming or going. And once you've lost that, you're just along for the ride. You have to be able to mentally put yourself inside the helicopter so that right is right and left is left. What I'll do is I'll start this up. I'll turn the transmitter on, and I'm now talking to the helicopter. In the old days, the transmitters had a longer antenna. Those operated in the 27 megahertz range, and when you went to the flight line, you had to get a tag so that your frequency didn't compete with somebody else's. This uses a different technology altogether. It's what they call spread spectrum. There could be somebody standing right next to you using the same transmitter, and you won't interfere with each other. You actually bind your transmitter to your receiver. As a child, I've always been interested in aircraft, and the guy Sikorsky, he was a Russian. He actually, from what I understand, invented the first helicopter. This guy was a genius. It's not that difficult to understand the principle behind what makes it go up and down. As you can see, if I give it up stick, the pitch on the blade increases, and if you notice down here, the throttle also increases. So as you increase the load on the blades, you increase the gas to the carburetor, and the motor speeds up and you go up. What I've never really understood until now is, okay, I can understand how it goes up and down, but what makes it go forward? If you'll notice this right here, this is what they call a swash plate. And what happens as I give it nose down, which is what this is, as the blade turns, the pitch increases on the blade as it comes around to the rear of the helicopter, and then as the blade continues toward the front of the copter, the pitch on the blade decreases, giving it higher lift in the back that picks up the tail of the helicopter, and away you go. If you want to go to the right, the same principle is applied. You'd get more pitch on the left side of the copter. That would pull it up like this, and you would bank to the right. What gives you the angular position is the tail rotor, and that basically operates at a constant speed, and we just change the pitch on the blade, and that controls the nose of the helicopter. So I'm going to put some gas in it, and we'll start it up and see how long I haven't crashed in quite a while, so you might see something that is rather unpleasant, but I'll try and give it a whack. I'm going to start it up, but before I do that, I want to mention people that do this kind of stuff for a hobby. There's several trade magazines that you can subscribe to. All of them, one of the main themes is safety. When this thing is running, the velocity, the outer velocity on the blades is approaching 200 miles an hour. So it would, on a small child, it would amputate a limb. On an adult, it could really put you in a bad way. So when you do fly these things, regardless of the cost, you want to have the mental process that you are willing to crash this thing into the ground rather than let the thing fly over houses or get close to individuals. The magazine I subscribe to is the AMA. It's Amateur Modelers Association. It's about $70 a year. When you get that, you also get a $1 million liability policy that would cut in after your homeowner should something tragic happen, but that's something you don't want to experience. So when you're flying, you want to be out on the flight line. The only people that should be with you is maybe a spotter. Everybody else should be behind some kind of barrier. And you want to practice safety at all times. You want to keep your aircraft in mechanically sound and do a comprehensive pre-flight check, because you don't want to have a bad day. So having said that, we'll start her up. Okay, we're ready to go. All right, a lot of people ask me how do I know when it's time to land, and I've got a little timer on my transmitter here that starts beeping at me after 7 minutes, so I'll know it's time to set her down. On the first flight of the day, the first time out, I usually warm the engine up. Okay, we're about ready to pick up here. Okay, I'm going to do a right turn. I'm going to switch into what they call idle up 1. This kind of changes the characteristics of the blade and the motor. I'm going to do a loop here. We'll do a right turn with a bank. I usually try to land into the wind. It makes it a lot easier when the wind's coming at you. We'll try another loop here. This thing will fly upside down. I'm a little too nervous to do that today, but you can hover upside down. The thing about a helicopter is you don't need 80 feet to land it. Airplanes, not only do you need 80 to 100 feet, but you got to be able to put your plane within that 80 or 100 feet to land it. This thing here, you can basically land it in a 10-foot circle without too much trouble. All right, we'll do one more pass, then I'll bring it in for a landing. When you first start out, you spend all your time just hovering because you do have to get proficient at hovering. If you can't land it, flying it's sure no fun. So that's what I do.
Great job. Great job.